So we've done a couple of these so far. We Some of the topics that we've already done is all about Saginaw Township Community Schools. We've talked about curriculum. We've talked about you as a superintendent. So the topic today that we want to discuss is anytime a school district introduces a bond proposal to their communities, during those proposals, a lot of questions come up about school operations, school funding, how proposals work, previous sinking funds, a lot of different questions that are surrounding bond proposals.
Well, and I would say not just a lot of questions, a lot of information swirls around.
Sure.
Some of it is factual, some of it is not. Some of it is assumptions. Unfortunately, sometimes I think information is shared in a way to confuse people intentionally.
Sure.
So we do see a lot of similarities across different school districts when there is a bond proposal that is presented to the community. And so, today we just thought we would talk about addressing some of those common wonderings and questions and information. How does school funding even work? Goes right in with the school bond proposal.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great opportunity, to just kind of talk about some of these things. For instance, the very first thing, what is a bond? So we talk about bonds, and the community sometimes is what the heck is a bond? A bond allows school districts to raise funds for major infrastructure projects, such as repairing buildings, updating safety systems, and modernizing classrooms without reducing the daily operation budget, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And that's important because the daily operation budget is meant for that. We get a budget that is appropriate for operating a school, and that's for a single school year. So every year we get a new operating budget, and that's what that's intended for. It's to operate the school. So there's not a lot of money left over to do the types of major repairs. There's money for upkeep and maintenance and smaller projects, but not to do major repairs or major renovations or new renovations to facilities. And so that is when in Michigan, you have to go to the community and you have to ask for an increase in taxes, basically, to pay for those projects up front.
Sure. And a lot of question, too, we get is, can bond money be used for learning materials like books and pencils and things like that?
Bond money cannot be used for a few things. It cannot be used for learning materials. That funding is given to us in the per pupil amount, which makes up our operating amount. So if we were to purchase textbooks, if we were to purchase pencils, papers, all those types of things, that is intended from what we call the general fund. It's also the per pupil amount that you hear about in the news when they're talking about school budgets. It cannot be used for those things, and it also cannot be used for salaries. It can't be used to increase anyone's salary. It can't be used to offset a salary. That is also given to us in the operating budget. The majority of our budget goes towards salaries because we're in the people business. That's what we do. We hire people to educate students. And that when I say educate students, I mean from bus drivers who transport kids to and from school, buildings and grounds who mow the grass and shovel the sidewalks and make sure that, the bathrooms are cleaned, to custodial and cafeteria workers who provide lunches and breakfasts for students. And then, of course, the teacher salaries, the administrator salaries, those types of things.
Sure. And as you mentioned earlier, Michigan is one of the only states that does not provide money for infrastructure. So a school district does have to go to their community to ask for that.
Yeah, that's the system that we're given. That sometimes feels like an unfair system, but that is the system that we are given. That is our only option to do major renovations and new construction or anything like that, just because that's the system Michigan has.
Okay, so we hear a lot about sinking funds. And people say, well, what about sinking fund money? Why can't that be used to, do all of these projects that we're looking for? So what's the difference between a sinking fund and bond funds?
Well, a sinking fund is much smaller. And so it is a much smaller funding source in order to do some projects, but it's not intended because it's just not going to generate the type of funding that you need to do major projects. You can do projects, and those projects can feel pretty hefty, but not enough to renovate or update an entire district. That's a little bit of the difference. That's more of in between, for example, bonds, maybe you would pass sinking funds to make sure that you're moving the district forward and you're continually addressing more major issues and projects than what your general fund will address, but it's not quite large enough for major projects.
Some of the major
Yeah.
infrastructure. Okay. And, when a school district introduces a bond, how much pre-planning has pretty much gone into that before they introduce that proposal?
Well, if we're talking in general for school districts, there's a few different ways to do the pre-planning for a bond. No matter what district you are, it requires a lot of planning. It requires a lot of thought. It requires experts to come to the table, whether it's a smaller bond because you have a few projects or a larger bond because you have major projects that you want to do. And so there's a lot of pre-planning. For us at Saginaw Township, a lot of that pre-planning came into play with our needs assessment because our buildings are at an age where they just have very specific needs, regardless of whether it's updating a classroom that hasn't been updated or adding HVAC systems or adding secure vestibules at the entrances. Ours came down to what did our needs assessments say in order to update the facilities, but also update our learning environments. So that was our process, was looking at the needs assessment and then taking that to, we chose to have a steering committee, taking that to a steering committee and saying, these are our needs. Do you think from your perspective and the group that you may be representing, because we had representatives from across the community, from different sectors of the community, do you think the community can get behind supporting these needs? And that was our process. There's a lot of different processes you can take, but that's how we went about it.
Okay. And in a school district, if a bond passes, what is a typical time of design and construction?
So that is one thing that is, I think people would be surprised at if they knew the reality of it. Because let's say the bond passes, and then people expect to see construction right away, but that really doesn't happen because we've given proposals and things that we would like to do to update our facilities. Then when the bond passes, you bring in the experts, you bring in the engineers to make sure if you're moving a wall, that wall can be moved, for example. To put it in really simple terms. You bring in architects to make sure that it's done appropriately. You bring in, for example, when we talk about our safety concerns and addressing those with bond funds, we'll be bringing in the Saginaw Township Police Department. Now, they helped with the pre-proposal, that could be on the ballot. But then we bring them in and say, okay, what exactly does the police department need to see in a secure vestibule, for example? Things like that. So we bring experts to the table, and that planning process takes quite a while because there's a lot of projects that need to happen. So bonds will be done in phases. They're called series, but basically it's a phase. Phase one is usually a little smaller because you're not going to get as much construction because there's so much planning that's done. So you do take a lot of time planning, and then you get some construction. And then phase two is much more construction and the remainder of the construction because we've already done the planning and taken the time to do that in phase one or series one. They're called series.
I think that's important to know because I think people in the community, after if a bond passes, they drive by it. Well, when are they going to start? When are they going to start? Not realizing that there is a lot of work with that design and construction. So, all right, we're going to take a little bit of a different turn now. Some other questions about funding. So, a question we hear a lot is, don't schools get a lot of lottery money? Where does that lottery money go? Can't that lottery money take care of these projects? Give us a little bit of insight into the lottery money.
The lottery money is a very hot topic. And I think it's because we see lottery, when we hear about jackpots, they're huge. So if we even get a percentage of that, it must be huge, right? That's the assumption that is made. What people don't realize is that we get it equals about 26 or 27 cents on the dollar. And that does not go directly to Saginaw Township Community Schools. That goes to the state, and the state uses that as part of that per pupil or general fund, the operating budget that I spoke about.
Mhm.
They put that in there, and then they send that to the schools. And it is actually a very small amount. And in addition to that, some of the lottery money and quite a bit of the lottery money actually goes to public universities and public colleges. All of the money that is being said giving to schools is not necessarily going to K-12 education.
Sure.
And in addition to that, it does not come directly to Saginaw Township. That's kind of how that works. I think there's a lot of confusion around that. And sometimes it doesn't always make sense because the lottery, when you hear about jackpots, they're huge sometimes. They're
For
millions
sure.
of dollars.
Sure.
So the school's getting a percentage. It makes sense that people would think we get a lot of money from that, and we just don't. That's just not the reality of it.
We have that graph that is provided by our financial department, and it's 7% of the graph comes from lottery money, but actually K through 12, as you mentioned, is only about 2%.
Yes.
Because 5% goes actually to colleges and secondary education.
Secondary education, yeah.
But it's also, the marketing that you see with the lottery, of young children getting on buses with backpacks and they're little kids, and your money is going towards the lottery. Your money's going to the schools. So buy some scratch offs and all the money goes to the schools. So it's a little bit of we obviously, school districts do get the money, but it's also good to sort of educate on how much actually comes to the
let's talk about the
districts.
reality of it.
Yeah, sure.
And that marketing has worked because people do assume that it's a lot more than what it actually is.
Some more funding questions. Why can't school districts just ask for grants or donations for bond projects?
Well, we can. We can ask for grants and donations. And as a matter of fact, we do a lot of grant writing. Every grant that we qualify for, and that's the key word, how many grants does the school actually qualify for? And when people get into the reality of that, it's not a lot. We do have grants that we have to qualify for through Michigan Department of Education, and we do apply for those, and a lot of those we do get. But those grants through the Department of Education, $0 in those grants can be used for infrastructure, for remodeling, for renovating, for anything like that. Those are very specific grants, and a grant usually is. It's usually for a very specific purpose.
Okay.
And the grants that you hear about other organizations being able to, build a new soup kitchen or something along those lines, we don't qualify for those grants. Even if we wanted to apply for those grants, we can't because we don't qualify. If there is an opportunity for grant funding that we do qualify for, we do take advantage of that. And I think most schools do.
Sure.
And then as far as donations go, if you talk to any CEO, if you talk to any president of a company or a corporation, they'll tell you that they have foundations that will give funding for some specific things. That's where the money is when you ask for a donation. It's in a foundation. And foundations aren't set up to renovate an entire district. It just doesn't work that way. And that's kind of how it works across the corporate world, that they have a foundation. You can apply to the foundation, which we also do that.
Sure.
And you might be able to get a project done. You might be able to purchase some, books for a classroom or something like that, but that just doesn't exist.
Yeah, that would be hard as a corporation to maybe, fund one school, but not the neighboring school or the other school down the street. I mean, that would be very difficult. Or
exactly.
To
and
fund all of
corporations
those.
they can't just write a big check to fund the renovation of a building.
Sure.
That's not how it works. The money goes into a foundation. You apply to that foundation. And again, like you said, could you imagine what would happen if schools found out that a a corporation renovated all of Saginaw Township.
Yeah.
It's just not going to work that way.
Sure. I think it's very important too. That is one thing I've learned that, I didn't know before that, title grants and grants have to be used very specifically for things
Mm-hmm.
and cannot be, very strict rules attached to
Mm-hmm.
those grants. And I didn't realize that before I,
Yeah.
worked in a district. So,
Well, and I think that's reasonable. It
Yeah.
seems logical. A lot of it, like when we talked about the lottery, it seems logical. That's a lot of money that goes into the lottery. Schools must get
Mhm.
a lot of money back from the lottery, and that's just
Sure.
not the reality of it. So I understand the misunderstanding on that.
Sure.
And I appreciate it when people ask
Sure.
for us to explain it to them, because I get that point of view. I can
Yeah.
understand there seems like a lot of money out in the corporate world.
Sure.
Why can't you just ask an organization to fund this for you? Well, because that's just not the way it works.
Sure. Two other questions that we hear a lot, not only us, but in the state of Michigan or across the U.S. when districts ask for bonds is, consolidation and new builds.
Mhm.
And they say, a lot of members of the public will say, why can't we just consolidate into two buildings or three buildings? Why can't we just build all brand new buildings instead of trying to, you know, create walls and things with the existing? So how would you answer that question?
Well, number one, we listened for us specifically. This is going to be a specific, I know we're talking generally about bonds in general,
Sure.
but specifically for Saginaw Township, the last bond proposal in 2023 had a new build on it. It was the rebuild of Heritage High School. We were going to replace Heritage High School with a rebuild, a brand new building. And the community said loud and clear that's a very, very costly. And the community spoke loud and clear, and we listened because we want our community to be behind us on what we provide to the community.
Sure.
And they said that that's too expensive. A new build is very expensive. Now, my next question, if I were the average citizen, but is it okay to take a building the age we have and renovate it? So again, we looked at our needs assessment, we looked at the experts, and they said, and they looked at the bones of our building. And the bones of our building, although we don't love the layout of some of our buildings, we would have liked to have not had the pods and at Heritage High School. That was one of the reasons for the purpose behind the rebuild or the new build.
Sure.
But the bones are good. We need to renovate. We need to update those buildings and renovate them to make them appropriate for today's learner, to make them safer. But the structure is not something that we're necessarily concerned with. Now, does every building eventually need a new roof? Yes. And that's what we're talking about.
Sure.
But other than that, the experts that we used said, no, you can renovate this and get a lot of life out of this. It's not something you're going to have to turn around and go back to the community in 10 years and ask for something else on.
Sure.
So,
That's something to be said about a building like Hemeter
yeah.
that's been around for 86 years, and had a lot of children pass through that building. That it was built pretty tough,
Yeah.
back in 1939 or 38, whatever it was.
It
And-
was built very tough
yeah,
because
and that
the
we've
bones
taken
are
care
good.
of it. That we've taken care of it through those years in order to get all of those kids
Yes.
through. But sometimes it's it's older structures. So let's turn our attention a little bit now to a topic that we also hear a lot about, which is schools of choice.
Mhm.
So schools of choice discussions always come up during bond proposals.
Yeah.
Explain what school of choice is and how it works within a district, specifically, I guess, Saginaw Township District.
So, school of choice is an opportunity for it's in the title. You have a choice. A lot of people believe parents should have a voice and a choice in their child's education, and this allows that. So, schools can choose to have school of choice for their schools. Now, they can just have open school of choice where people apply and they're accepted. At Saginaw Township, we actually have more of a controlled school of choice. We have school of choice only through kindergarten through 6th grade. We do not have school of choice in 7th grade through 12th grade. There's some very specific reasons for that. We believe that the academics that we offer, we want kids to get here. First of all, we want them to come for the right reasons. We want them to be here because they believe in what we offer academically for their children. And secondly, we want families to get into the district, get acclimated to the district, to be
Sure.
able to adjust and fit in with our climate, our cultures, our expectation,
From the beginning.
yeah, right from the beginning. And that's easier to do when you grow up in that. And that's the idea. If you would like your children to come to Saginaw Township, they need to come early enough so they can grow up with us. And that's kind of the idea behind it. We use school of choice as a stabilizer. So instead of having wild swings in numbers of students, which affects everything from how many staff you need to all of those types of things, we look at every single class, and then we determine how many students we could accept for school of choice, and that's how many applications we would accept. And so it stabilizes us so we don't have wild swings, that we can have a budget that we can plan on. We have a staff that has security and safety in their positions. And we offer parents the opportunity to come to Saginaw Township, and I don't blame them for wanting to be here. I have my own children are here, and
Sure.
I think we offer something that a lot of school districts don't, and
Sure.
so that's where our school of choice comes from.
And I know in our district, Saginaw Township, it's about 21% is our school of choice.
It
So
is.
we do get asked that question quite a bit as well.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to turn back a little bit to a bond and cost and taxes, because a bond proposal, if it passes in any school district, is a tax increase for the community.
It is.
We know times are a little tough sometimes with inflation, and people's pocketbooks are all across the board. Some people have a lot of money, some people don't. We understand that in the community, a lot of different demographics. But what are some ways to possibly offset the cost to a homeowner if a bond does pass in a community?
Well, first I want to say that, we don't take this lightly. We don't go to our community and just very lightly ask for more money, regardless of what your economic status is. But we also know, number one, materials, construction, the cost of everything is not going down. So the longer we wait, the more it's going to cost, and we know we have needs that we need to address now. So when we put the proposal together, we kept in mind that there may be people on a fixed income that this could be hard for. So then we did a lot of work with our financial advisors and with our finance department to make sure we have some options or some relief for people that may be in that situation. And we've really talked a lot about the homestead tax credit. And that homestead tax credit is exactly that. We have a calculator right on our website where you could go to put your information in. It goes off of the taxable value, not the market value of your home. And then it also goes off of what phase of life are you in? Are you a general citizen? Are you a senior citizen? Are you a disabled citizen? You choose one of those things. And then you put in your home's income. What is your yearly income in your home? And then it calculates whether or not you would qualify for the tax credit. And if you live on a fixed income, you're probably going to qualify for that. And then it kind of offsets that cost per month and per year for you. Really, it's per year. Annually, it would offset the annual amount that you would pay. And that was one of the reasons why, even though we know everybody is kind of, like you said, there's a big spectrum out there for how this is going to impact families in our community. And we brought this to the community knowing that even if this was a hard time for you, that you could take a look at that calculator and see how this really would impact you. It's not a one size fits all. It just isn't. And then make an educated decision on whether you're going to support it or not.
I remember a lot of those conversations with finance. and looking into these
Mm-hmm.
things like homestead credits, poverty exemption
Yep.
forms, so that we could get that information out to the community. At the same time asking for a tax increase,
Yeah.
but also finding ways to introduce a lot of
Mhm.
this information to the community to say, but you can also possibly save on some of this with credits and poverty exemptions. So,
Yeah, there is that poverty exemption form.
sure, sure,
And that does need to be filled out annually. That
sure.
is the form but if you have a hardship and it's just too much, there's even that route you could take.
Sure.
You can find that poverty exemption form information right on our website. Um, and that's also an option if you're having hardship.
Mhm. That's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions that you're kind of hearing out there in the community that maybe you would like to address? I think we hit a lot of the big ones that we're hearing, or that you would hear during a bond proposal. Any other things that it's kind of
I think we really covered a lot.
yeah.
I think that there is a lot of misinformation going around. One thing that continues to come up is insinuating that there's going to be an interest that gets paid on the bond, and that's absolutely true. And there isn't a bond proposal that would be put on a ballot that isn't true for, because that's how bonds work. Very similar to a mortgage on a home or any loan that you would take out. But all of that is calculated in the numbers and the information in the numbers on of increase that are on the ballot. All of that is calculated right into all of that. So
Sure.
we've been very transparent about all of those things. I think it's unfair to say that we haven't talked about the interest when we're talking about a bond. A bond has interest. A loan has interest. This is a loan that our community is agreeing to help us pay.
Mhm. And I think the other thing too is there's a lot of questions that are asked in the air out into the community, but the biggest thing for me is to invite people to always pick up the phone and call. Call the school district. It's okay. You can call us, pick it up. We will answer any question that you've had. Anytime anything comes up, not just a bond proposal, but if you ever have a question about the school district, we just invite everybody to pick up the phone and ask us.
Yeah.
Email us, ask us. We're very willing to answer any question. We've been doing a lot of that in the last couple of weeks. People wanting to know about schools, finance, why we do what we do. And we have great conversations with them. And by the end of the conversation, they say, I did not know that. And that's nice to know.
Yeah.
So, regardless of a bond proposal, just anytime we would like people to just ask.
Well, we have this, we're really talking about how these are your schools, our community, and that's something that we continue to say because we believe it. To my core, I believe that these are our community schools, and this is our community, and schools add value to a community. They add value to your home. They add value to your neighborhood. And so we don't take that responsibility lightly. And when we say it's your schools, our community, we mean it. And so we're happy to answer any community members' questions at any time. And we are getting a lot of phone calls. We're getting a lot of emails, and we're responding to each one of them.
Sure.
We have opportunities and forums where the community can come in and ask questions, and we've answered every question openly and honestly. We're just out here trying to educate kids, trying to give kids the very best experience in education and in school that we can give them so that they can go out and be productive citizens.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for answering all of the questions that we've been hearing out into the community and having that conversation. We always like to end each podcast with a Did You Know? And we've been talking a lot about community. So one of our Did You Knows is that STCS maintains strong partnerships, and you know this, with at least 30 local businesses and organizations. And our work-based program within the high school sends at least 33 students in our program in 2025 out to these 30 businesses to work. So our students are bank tellers, they're automotive techs, retail customer service employees. They work at Nextier, they work in law firms. This is community, connections where these kids are going out and working for these businesses, making money early, learning the value of dollar, learning the value of hard work.
Exploring careers,
Which is
Yes.
extremely important. So that's a big did you know that we partner with 30 local businesses.
We're really proud of our work-based learning program, and so we'll definitely have to do a podcast
Yes.
on just that
Definitely.
because it is a great opportunity for not just our businesses to recruit and retain students. They might go off to college, but hopefully come back here to live and raise their family.
Yeah.
But also for kids to explore and figure out what they want to do with their life. So
Sure.
it's a great program, one that we're really proud of.
Well, another one, did you know? And this is the elementary kids. So Weiss Elementary has a student council that has over 25 fourth and fifth graders. So what's important about this, because we're talking about community, is each month they go out into the community in Saginaw Township and they raise money for families in need with a lot of events that they do at Weiss. But they also go caroling at Kroger's. They go caroling at the local senior centers. They literally walk down from Weiss down to the senior center. They do at least 2 food drives, and they do outreach programs with a whole bunch of senior centers and local nursing homes. So
Yeah.
it's from high school all the way down to elementary that they're giving back to the community.
Remember
So-
that we're talking about fourth and fifth graders.
Yes, that we're
that's
teaching them early.
amazing. Yeah.
So good. All right, we will can't wait for the next episode, and so thanks again, and
Yeah.
we thank everybody for listening.